Imagine this. A man in his late 30s walks away from his high-rise office in the middle of a weekday. His suit, still neatly pressed, absorbs the city's heat, but he doesn't seem to notice. He leaves his laptop behind. His phone is turned off. There's no farewell email, no cryptic social media post. Just silence. Dense, deliberate silence. His coworkers gossip in whispers about burnout or a midlife crisis. But they're wrong. This isn't collapse. It's awakening. In a culture that equates obedience with virtue and ambition with identity, what does it mean when a man says no? Not with a scream, not with violence, but with his absence? The man who walks away from society's script is not simply tired. He is done. He is no longer seduced by the arc of career progression, the illusion of security, the mandatory rituals of social success. Somewhere deep within, he has arrived at a line he refuses to cross, a boundary where performance must give way to presence. This is not an act of cowardice. It is an act of radical courage. We are told from a young age that life has a path, and that path is narrow. Get good grades, attend the right schools, land the job, find a partner, buy the home, raise the kids, accumulate, achieve, endure, and then maybe retire into peace. But for some men, the friction between the soul's longing and the structure's demands becomes unbearable. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But what if that privilege requires breaking with everything you've ever been told to be?" There comes a moment when the script no longer holds. Not because the man is weak, but because he is no longer willing to pretend. He is not depressed in the clinical sense. He is disillusioned in the existential sense. Disillusionment, after all, is not a loss. It is the death of illusion. And in its place comes a terrifying freedom. This freedom, however, is not immediately liberating. It is weighty, raw, and without clear direction. To leave the script is to stand in a psychological wilderness, one where the landmarks of approval and validation no longer guide you. It is to risk becoming a stranger not only to the world, but to yourself. Society is uncomfortable with such men. It labels them dropouts, losers, hermits, or failures, anything to avoid confronting the possibility that they might be right. That success without authenticity is just another form of imprisonment. That productivity, when divorced from purpose, is spiritual erosion. What compels a man to walk away is not always catastrophic. Sometimes it's the quiet accumulation of moments, boardroom meetings that feel like funerals, smiles that feel rehearsed, conversations where nobody really says anything. Sometimes it's the death of a parent, the end of a relationship, or a brush with mortality that pierces through the trance. Jean-Paul Sartre noted, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. But when all you've made is based on what others demanded of you, what then?" A man who walks away is not denying his identity. He is reclaiming it from the scaffolding that was built around him. He is not anti-society for its own sake. He is anti-falseness. His exit is not an escape from responsibility, but a search for a truer kind of responsibility, one rooted in his values, not the culture's performance metrics. There is, of course, fear. There is grief. There is guilt. To leave the script is also to leave behind everything that gave you a name. Without the resume, the titles, the income, the applause, who are you? This question haunts the first stage of walking away. It destabilizes the ego, punctures the mythology of success, and invites a more ancient voice to speak, a voice long buried under obligations and expectations. The voice of the inner man. Arthur Schopenhauer observed, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone." This isn't a call to isolation. It's a call to reconnection. But that reconnection begins in solitude. Not the empty solitude of loneliness, but the rich, often painful solitude of reflection, of not knowing, of waiting for something real to emerge. The man who walks away is not always angry. He may even smile quietly as he closes the door behind him. Not because he has figured it out, but because at last he's no longer lying. And so the first step is taken. Not toward a destination, but away from a deception. There is a silence that follows after a man walks away. Not the peaceful, meditative kind, but the disorienting silence that comes when familiar sounds, the clatter of schedules, the buzz of urgency, the constant background noise of performance, vanish all at once. It is in this silence that the real confrontation begins. To walk away from society's script is not merely to change one's outer world. It is to invite a storm inward. The man who once found meaning in metrics, roles, and deadlines now finds himself in a void. The ground beneath him, social affirmation, career identity, familial expectations, has disappeared. And yet, this emptiness is not failure. It is the prerequisite for transformation. Friedrich Nietzsche captured this descent in stark clarity. One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. This chaos is not optional. It is a rite of passage. And it is merciless. The modern man, trained from childhood to be functional, effective, and rational, is suddenly stripped of purpose. He is no longer the lawyer, the provider, the achiever, the one who made it. What remains? His inner world, a place often unexplored, now roaring awake with questions, regrets, buried longings, and shadow selves. Psychologically, this is where the descent becomes archetypal. Carl Jung referred to this as the meeting with the shadow, those aspects of the psyche that we repress to stay acceptable. When a man no longer has to perform for anyone, the mask drops, and what he finds underneath is not always noble. He may encounter the part of himself that resents his wife and children, the part that fantasizes about disappearing completely, the part that feels weak, ashamed, or even monstrous. These inner revelations do not make him evil. They make him honest. The descent strips away illusions and forces him to reconcile the parts of himself he denied in order to fit into the man-box society constructed for him. There is mourning in this phase. Mourning not just for what is lost, but for what was never truly his. The life he spent years building now feels like a well-decorated cage. Viktor Frankl wrote, "When a man cannot find meaning, he numbs himself with pleasure." Many men in this stage realize how much of their past was soaked in distraction. Overworking, drinking, constant stimulation, all to avoid the quiet truth that none of it touched their soul. There are days when the man feels utterly derailed. Sleep becomes erratic. Thoughts loop in circles. He may feel rage 1 hour and apathy the next. Friends don't understand him. Family worries. Society offers platitudes like, "You'll figure it out," or urges him to get back out there. But these are not solutions, they are echoes of the script he just left behind. And so he descends deeper. This is the soul's night, and it cannot be bypassed. It is important to understand that this descent is not pathological. It is mythological. It is the hero's journey inverted. He is not climbing toward light but diving into darkness, where the real gold is buried. The myth of Inanna's descent, the crucifixion of Christ, the trials of Odysseus, even Buddha's departure from his palace. Each speaks of a man or woman leaving the known world and entering the unknown not to escape, but to return transformed. This is not a spiritual bypassing. It is not retreating into idealism or fantasy. It is a breaking down, a deconstruction of false self. The man may weep for the first time in years, not knowing exactly why. He may write late into the night, fill journals with anger, confusion, poetry. He may take long walks through woods or alleyways, muttering questions to a God he stopped believing in. Jean-Paul Sartre warned that existence precedes essence, which means we are not born with a fixed purpose. We must create it. But creation requires destruction. Essence emerges not through obedience, but through confrontation with emptiness. In this stage, many men are tempted to run back, to rejoin the familiar script, if only to stop the psychological bleeding. But to return too soon is to abort the transformation. The caterpillar does not become a butterfly by crawling back out of the cocoon. The cocoon must dissolve him first. To endure this stage is to hold one's ground in the face of ego death. It is to allow the old self to decompose, not out of self-hatred, but out of reverence for the truth. This is the space in which a man dies to who he was told to be and waits, often painfully, often in silence, for who he truly is to begin taking shape. As Aldous Huxley once wrote, "Experience is not what happens to you. It's what you do with what happens to you." In the abyss, experience no longer flatters the ego. It shapes the soul. The descent, then, is not punishment. It is initiation. And the man who survives it does not emerge unchanged. Once a man has descended into the depths of his own undoing, he finds something paradoxical. The silence that once roared now whispers. The inner chaos begins to settle, if only slightly. There's no arrival yet, no revelation carved in lightning, but there is a shift. A new voice begins to emerge. It is quieter than the old ego, slower, but it feels real. And this is where the next danger waits, not in failure, but in premature rebirth. After the storm of detachment, after the ego has been stripped bare, a man becomes fertile soil. But what grows first is not always truth. Sometimes what emerges are clever imposters, new identities that feel spiritual, enlightened, or wise, but are still defense mechanisms in disguise. This is the stage of false rebirth, and it is, in many ways, more seductive than the life he walked away from. Now that he's abandoned the suit, he might don the robe. Now that he's discarded ambition, he may seek transcendence. Now that he has rejected society, he may claim superiority over it. The man who once performed for corporations may now perform for communities of mindfulness, minimalism, or even rebellion. The performance simply changes costumes. As Carl Jung warned, the greatest danger to the individual comes from the collective. Even in walking away from one collective, the need to belong, to be seen, to feel righteous remains. If unchecked, this need can twist the man's awakening into another theater. A new role, just as hollow as the last, cloaked in the language of authenticity. The irony is piercing. A man leaves the script only to become the protagonist of another. This is the psychological rebound, a new identity formed too quickly, born of the need to escape the discomfort of liminality. It may be the spiritual seeker, the rugged minimalist, the stoic intellectual, or even the noble loner. Each identity comes with its own dogmas, tribes, and self-congratulations. But they share a common root: avoidance. Avoidance of sitting long enough in the ambiguity. Avoidance of accepting that one may never fully know what the self is. Avoidance of confronting the raw truth that there is no final arrival, only the deepening of presence. Arthur Schopenhauer saw through this when he wrote, "Every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world." The false rebirth narrows vision while claiming to have expanded it. It offers certainty, identity, and narrative, precisely the comforts the man tried to escape. To resist this temptation is excruciating, because the liminal space between who you were and who you are becoming is so vulnerable, so undefined. No longer a company man, but not yet an integrated man. No longer obedient, but not yet rooted. This middle space, what some call the sacred wound, is fertile but volatile. It's here that the man must practice what philosopher Simone Weil called attention, a patient, disciplined waiting without demanding meaning to arrive on command, not building a new personality to protect the wound, but allowing the wound to inform what comes next. There is a certain humility required here, a breaking down not only of pride, but of the impulse to name things too quickly. A man may feel deeply inspired by a quote from Nietzsche or Viktor Frankl and want to turn it into a philosophy of life. But this, too, can become dogma. Words are not replacements for direct experience. Concepts, no matter how profound, are not a substitute for becoming. Instead of grasping, the man must now listen. He may begin to notice the subtle things, how the wind feels on his skin, how long-silenced emotions stir during a song, how his hands move when carving wood or writing poetry. These are not grand revelations. They are invitations to remember what it feels like to be whole, to be fully human, not a role, not a product, not a mask. In this stage, he begins to move from meaning-making to meaning-living. But the old world doesn't disappear. He may be tempted, still, to return to it, especially when finances tighten, when relationships fray, when loneliness creeps in. The script still calls him, softly but constantly. It tells him, you could go back. You were good at it. You were needed. This is the final test of false rebirth, when the comfort of the old self seems more appealing than the uncertainty of the emerging one. But now he knows too much. He has seen behind the curtain. And even if he wanted to return, he couldn't fully. The part of him that woke up will not go back to sleep. So he waits, watches, feels, learns how to live without armor. And slowly, the space he cleared by walking away begins to offer its first true gift. Not an identity, but a direction. A compass built not from social programming, but from soul. The man who walks away from society's script does not only abandon a system, he unsettles every relationship forged within it. His departure is not neutral. It ripples. Partners feel betrayed. Parents worry. Friends, once aligned in shared ambitions and rituals, grow distant. Love becomes complicated. Companionship, once stable, begins to fracture beneath the weight of a man trying to become something or someone he can't yet define. The tragedy is often quiet. Not explosive fights or dramatic goodbyes, but fading calls, dinners filled with silence, moments of unspoken grief. Because what happens when you no longer recognize the man across from you? Or worse, when he no longer recognizes himself? Love does not always survive awakening. Sometimes it was held together only by the mutual play-acting of the old script. A man becomes a provider, a protector, a performer, and in doing so forgets to be himself. Once he sheds those roles, what's left may no longer fit the person he promised those roles to. It is not cruelty. It is divergence. Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "If you're lonely when you're alone, you're in bad company." But the deeper truth is that most men have never truly been alone, not in the sense of being with themselves without distraction. They have been surrounded, partnered, connected, yet unknown, even to their own hearts. Now, as solitude takes root, loneliness sharpens its teeth. He misses touch, conversation, the shared small rituals of the day, coffee made for two, the unspoken language of long-term companionship. These absences ache. They scream. They test the man's resolve. Was the price of walking away too high? But here's the cruel paradox. He may never have fully been in those relationships. Not authentically. He was enacting a version of himself, reliable, successful, goal-oriented. He loved, yes, but perhaps through a mask. Now that the mask has fallen, he longs for connection again. But he wants to be seen as he truly is. No performance, no pleasing, no adaptation. And this kind of intimacy, it is rare. It requires a partner who has also done the descent. Someone who can hold space for his uncertainty, his silence, his changing values. Many cannot, not because they are unkind, but because they are still in the script themselves. And to love a man who has rejected it is to confront one's own complicity in it. This becomes a moment of devastating clarity. Some relationships will end, others will transform, and some rare and luminous will deepen. Because when a man is no longer bound by expectation, he can finally offer something sacred, presence. Not the presence of obligation, but the presence of truth, of attentiveness, of being with someone without trying to fix, impress, or control them. Viktor Frankl wrote, "Love is the only way to grasp another human being in the innermost core of his personality." This is the kind of love the man now craves. Not comfort, not chemistry, but soul recognition. Yet it begins not with another, but with himself. This stage demands emotional nakedness. He must learn to sit with his loneliness, not as a curse, but as a mirror. What does he actually want in a relationship? What did he perform to receive love before? What parts of himself did he suppress to stay desirable, safe, or needed? The answers are often humbling. He may realize he confused intensity for intimacy, or that he used his status, competence, or intellect to avoid vulnerability. That love was often a transaction, affection in exchange for function. The emptiness now is not punishment. It is purification. Slowly, a new form of intimacy begins to grow. Not loud or lustful, but quiet and anchoring. It might emerge in a moment of self-forgiveness, a deep talk with an old friend, or a shared silence with someone who needs no explanation. These moments matter. They tether him to a human thread he thought he'd lost. Aldous Huxley once said, The more powerful and original a mind, the more it will incline towards the religion of solitude. But solitude is not isolation. It is the ground from which real connection blooms, connection not of dependence, but of choice, of resonance. In this solitude, he discovers how to love not from need, but from wholeness. It doesn't mean he no longer longs for connection. It means the kind of connection he seeks has changed. He no longer wants someone to complete him. He wants someone to meet him fully, consciously, and with the same reverence for truth that now guides his own life. So he waits. He tends the space where performance once ruled. And in doing so, he becomes the kind of man who can be alone without being lost, and with another without being false. He is not unreachable. He is simply becoming real. There comes a day after the storm, the descent, the unraveling, when a man wakes up and feels still, not euphoric, not enlightened, but still like the center of a fire that no longer needs to rage. He brews his coffee slowly. He writes or walks or sits on the porch watching clouds roll past like old memories. He no longer measures his worth by how much he accomplishes before noon. The clock is no longer his master. There's a quiet fire in his chest now, a pulse of purpose that doesn't shout, but burns. Something has changed. This is not the return of ambition. It's the arrival of alignment. When a man walks away from society's script, he loses more than status. He loses his old reason for being. That loss is brutal, but in its ashes lies a deeper question. If I am no longer who I was told to be, who am I here to become? The culture he left behind was obsessed with scale. Everything needed to be big, visible, efficient, monetized. Purpose became branding. Legacy was marketed. Even service, in its most sincere form, was often co-opted into personal gain. But now, standing in this inner clearing, he begins to sense that meaning isn't found in grandeur. It's found in alignment, in congruence, in the invisible harmony between one's inner truth and outer action. Friedrich Nietzsche once declared, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how, and that why doesn't have to be loud." In fact, the most authentic purpose often whispers. Maybe it's in creating, carving wood, painting, making music not for applause but for communion. Maybe it's in mentoring one young man, in planting gardens, in building something slowly and locally. Maybe it's in speaking the truth even if only 5 people hear it. But they really hear it. The man no longer needs to be known by millions. He needs to be true to himself. And that truth begins guiding every decision. He stops asking, "What will this get me?" and begins asking, "Does this align with who I am becoming?" This shift is radical. It means saying no to opportunities that dazzle but don't resonate. It means earning less money, maybe, but gaining more integrity. It means walking slower, but walking straighter. No longer sprinting towards some imaginary milestone, but moving steadily with something ancient guiding him. Something less like strategy and more like instinct. Carl Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." And the awakened man is no longer waiting for permission. He begins to contribute in ways the world doesn't always recognize. He speaks from a deeper place. He creates from a place untouched by metrics. His work, whatever form it takes, becomes an extension of his presence, not a substitute for it. Yet purpose now is no longer synonymous with vocation. It is broader than that. It's in how he shows up with friends, how he speaks to his child, how he listens. Purpose is no longer the pursuit of becoming someone. It's the expression of already being someone, stripped to essence. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. The world still demands. Bills remain. Loved ones still struggle to understand his path. But he is no longer chasing life, he is inhabiting it. His actions are not dictated by trends or threats, but by truth. He may still grieve the life he left. He may still feel doubt. But now there is an axis inside him, something centered, something immovable, something earned through descent and silence and solitude. Aldous Huxley once remarked, "There's only one corner of the universe you can be certain of improving, and that's your own self. And that improvement is not cosmetic. It is the cultivation of integrity. The man now serves something larger than his ego. He may call it soul, or the divine, or simply what feels right. He doesn't need to name it to live by it. And this is the mark of his rebirth. He no longer seeks to dominate life. He seeks to partner with it. He has discovered that true purpose doesn't demand conquest. It requires alignment. So he works, or teaches, or writes, or gardens. He re-engages with the world not to prove his worth, but to participate in something meaningful. He has burned the script, but in the embers, he has begun to write a new one, word by word, not for the world's applause, but for the quiet confirmation of his own soul. And when he looks in the mirror now, he doesn't see the man he was told to become. He sees the man who chose to become. He stands now at the edge of the forest, figuratively and perhaps literally. Behind him lies the wilderness, the descent, the unraveling, the silence that taught him how to listen. Ahead is the world he once abandoned. Busy, loud, performance-driven, hungry for masks. But something is different now. The man is no longer running from it, nor is he rushing back to it. He is choosing to re-enter not as a participant in the script, but as a witness to it, as a soul who has found his center and is no longer willing to lose it. This is the return. But unlike the prodigal son, he is not returning to be embraced by old systems. He is not seeking forgiveness for his absence. He returns not with apologies, but with presence. A quieter, deeper participation in life, grounded not in proving himself, but in honoring himself. And the world, interestingly, does not know what to do with such a man. He does not rise to every bait. He does not seek validation. He does not hustle for worth. He may be in the office again, or walking through city streets, or standing at a family gathering, but his energy is different. He is here, but not entangled, engaged, but not consumed. He has become what the mystics and philosophers have long described as the awake man, not because he has answers, but because he has faced the questions without flinching. Arthur Schopenhauer observed, "Compassion is the basis of morality." And indeed, this man has gained not arrogance from his journey, but compassion. He sees through the games people play, the chasing, the pretending, the endless distraction, but he does not judge it. He remembers being there. He remembers how seductive it is to believe that the next promotion, next partner, next achievement will finally make it all make sense. But he also remembers the emptiness that followed. And so he walks gently now. He speaks more slowly, listens more deeply. His presence unsettles some, because he is no longer operating within the same emotional economy. He does not trade performance for approval. He does not offer parts of himself to be consumed. He has boundaries now, not as walls, but as sacred lines of self-respect. He has become sovereign. Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you." And this man, having been shaped and scarred by the script, has now turned those scars into symbols of freedom. Not escape, but integration. He does not live on the margins to reject life. He lives there to see it clearly. What's extraordinary is what begins to unfold. Without trying to inspire, he becomes inspiration. Without trying to lead, he becomes a guide. Without trying to love, he becomes deeply lovable, because his love is no longer tainted by need. He becomes the man others go to, not for advice, but for space. For the rare experience of not being judged, fixed, or managed, simply seen. This return, however, is not a single moment. It is ongoing. Each day offers temptations. The pull of the old world, the pressure to conform again, the longing for ease over integrity. But now he has a compass. Now he knows how to recognize the quiet voice of his soul beneath the static of the world. And he also knows this truth. It never ends. The path is not linear. Some days he will forget. Some days he will ache. He will lose his center and find it again. But the difference is he no longer fears the fall, because he has fallen before, and it led him here. To walk away from the script was never about exile. It was about returning differently, wiser, deeper, freer. Now, his purpose is not to escape the world, nor to fix it, It is to be whole within it, to live with eyes open, heart intact, and spirit engaged. Not because it is easy, but because it is real. Aldous Huxley once said, "The real hopeless victims of mental illness are to be found among those who appear to be most normal." And perhaps that's the greatest insight of all. That normality itself is often the disease. That conformity can be a slow soul death. That to awaken is to suffer first and then to live. Now, the man who walked away sits in a cafe, surrounded by people who don't know his story. He sips his drink. He watches them. He smiles, not from superiority, but from tenderness, from knowing, from having touched something true and survived its fire. And in that moment, without needing anything more, he is free.